I mean, universities like Cambridge has
Mhm.
sanctioned Russia. I tell you why I asked this question just a moment, because
Uh-huh.
they look up to Cambridge certificates, man. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
talking Russia. I mean, if you have like C1 or C2 level of like Cambridge certificate, it's like a like Olympic medal for
it
them,
is.
right? Right.
It is.
So how what was your reaction, like first reaction?
My first reaction was they can go screw themselves.
Hmm.
I was quite offended in a way because, well, first of all, I've been preparing students for these Cambridge exams for most of my
Yeah,
life in Russia.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the whole suite from A1 to C2.
Hmm.
The thing is, I understand why a lot of companies pulled out because of logistics and payment problems and things like that, which I get.
Absolutely agree with
Um,
you.
I get that. There are ways around it. You know, there are ways to make payment. I think it was about pulling out through reputational association. You
Hmm.
know, they didn't want to seem to still be doing business in Russia when everyone else has pulled out.
Hmm.
So I think that's a part of it. But I say 70% is definitely because the SWIFT payment system was cut
Right,
off.
right,
So
right.
people, I mean, but we basically, but the thing is, we make payment to the Cambridge centres in Russia. That's the thing. It's not to Cambridge in England. It's to the
Oh, okay.
payment centre in Russia, who obviously have to pay some royalty to Cambridge themselves. So
Yeah,
obviously that payment cannot be made.
right.
But if you think about the logistics, I don't understand why it would be bad, because if you're going to sit an exam, well, you do your speaking here face to face.
Hmm.
The writing can basically be scanned and sent to Cambridge if it's going
Right,
to be
right,
marked.
right.
So I don't really understand why Cambridge had to do that. Maybe I don't understand the full picture,
Yeah.
but yeah, a lot of Russians were quite gutted about this because you're right.
Mm.
They look up to Cambridge
Yeah,
as a gold standard of quality. I think Cambridge have gone down in quality over the years, if I'm honest.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, I have some issues with them a bit. I've noticed in the tests they provide, the materials, mistakes are more
Yeah,
frequent.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's a money making. It is a money making scheme. I mean, let's be fair.
Absolutely. Even
Yeah.
in IELTS, I'll tell you a story. Like
Mhm.
what happened last year in the month of around October, November. So
Mhm.
see, IELTS is a huge market in India. Because
Mhm.
many of the people are going abroad for immigration, migration, or
Yeah.
education, etc. So there were IELTS. I mean, I'm talking about British Council. British Council like came
Mhm.
from they were enrolling students for IELTS, and one fine day, like all the students get a notice that they'll no longer be conducting IELTS exams in India. But they had already been enrolled and they paid the fees and everything. So they're but I mean they can still appear for the exam, but it will be under IDP. IDP is Australian.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is why this kind of see it's a big institution, right? They could have
Mhm.
made it softer, like okay, you want to leave India, that's fine, but it should have been like a little softer. Okay, so from this date you cannot enroll. I mean, whoever is
Mhm.
enrolled until this date, they only can appear for the exams. Rest of them will go to IDP, etc. But they did like very abrupt. Students were
Yes.
disappointed, but they didn't care much because IDP and British Council doesn't make any difference anyway. There's
Yeah.
needed the aisles. So that is like very rude from them, I think.
It is because it didn't have to be like that. That's the thing.
Yeah,
But I think most of it, well, as I said, a lot of it's about logistics. But again, the other side is about their reputation because, we can't be seen siding or supporting Russia here with Cambridge exams because they're the aggressor, regardless of what you think politically or what's really
yeah, yeah,
happening.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the Russians have got nothing to do with this. They're just normal people like you and me
Exactly.
who want to, develop their lives. They want to take Cambridge exams because it's the gold standard
Yeah.
of assessing your levels from on their CFR scale. I think it goes to show that this is more than just education. There's a
Yeah.
huge political
Yeah.
undertone to it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You know?
I mean, they're kind of appearing themselves as like they're the de facto leaders of the education, and their
Yeah.
monopoly is like getting stronger and stronger. Like they can do whatever they want to do. I
Mm-hmm.
seriously believe that there should be replacement for like Oxford's and Cambridge, like taking
I agree. I agree.
international exams, because I mean we have given them too much power. Too much
Yeah.
power we have given them, as students or as teachers, that we believe in them a little too much, and we should
Yeah,
like
I
focus on
agree with
something
you
else.
completely. I think
Yeah.
we need to find an alternative. I'm actually working with a couple of people in the sort of High School of Economics in Moscow, a
Mm-hmm.
really prestigious institute,
Yeah.
and we're discussing creating alternative.
Mm-hmm.
And I might be actually writing an alternative to Cambridge exams myself.
Great.
So from from CET up to CPE, because the funny thing is, over the years as I've been teaching these, I've become even slightly disillusioned in the way they test students. Because I find my time not only teaching huge amounts of English and trying to teach students to speak naturally, creatively,
Mm-hmm.
but when you find that you have to spend half the time teaching for tactics and exam
Mm-hmm.
strategy
Mm-hmm.
instead of actually teaching the language, there's something wrong there. I mean, yeah, there's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be some kind of tactic or strategy for any exam.
Right.
But when for example, like in the say CAE listening,
Mm-hmm.
part 4, where you've got to do 2 tasks at the same time with 5 speakers, and you've got 8
Mm-hmm.
options here, 8 options here. That's not about English. That's about confusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think anyone in the real world would actually do a listening like that. But then again, on the other side, I like to be quite objective. Or how do you assess listening?
Yeah.
How do you have a one size fits all? Because again, Cambridge is used around the entire world.
Right.
But I still don't think the way that they do their exams are probably the best way anymore. Even with this, even when they prepare for writing, for example. I'll give you a very interesting example. I say when I say to teachers when I do webinars and conferences on how to prepare students for writing, I always give this question: if you give one essay, let's say a FCE or a CAE essay that a student has written, and I say, okay, if you give this essay to 5 different teachers, what are you going to get? And the answer is 5 different marks.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
It's going to be 5 different marks, because when you look at the Cambridge marking criteria, the assessment scale is so unclear, it's so vague, that it's open to interpretation. So when you're actually trying to prepare your students for this, you're none the wiser. And it's only through years of experience of trial and error and blood, sweat, and tears I've managed to find the kind of golden standard that we should be aiming here. And I wrote to Cambridge a couple of times to say, like, the teacher's handbook, the information in it is so unclear. What do you mean by sophisticated language? What do you mean by a sophisticated range of vocabulary? What is sophisticated to you? Maybe to me, the word sophisticated is moribund. Maybe sophisticated to them is the word hello. But what is it? You see, and there's no kind of scale. And so it's just kind of guesswork. And so that's why when you do prepare for these exams, a lot of it is just cross your fingers and hope for the best.
Correct. I agree with you. Same thing with IELTS as well, especially in the speaking part. What happens is you have to portray that variety range of grammar, like, a lot of grammar you need to know. I know people who are completely fluent in English, and they get 7 or 6.5 like that, only because I asked them, what was the question they asked? They asked me so and so questions. Sometimes you don't have to use third conditional, right? We may be talking right now, but you don't have to use the third conditional. Then I told them specifically, see, some way or the other use the third conditional. Some way or the other use this grammar form. Some way or other use these vocabularies. That way you can score your mark, but that doesn't reflect the level of English you have.
Exactly. It's like having to use certain points for the sake of it. And as a result, you kind of lose this natural flair. On the other side of the scale, which is quite interesting, is that in Russia, when it comes to assessing the speaking tests, there used to be native speakers. I used to be a Cambridge examiner for the speaking test, but I stopped after a couple of years because honestly, it's so boring. It really is boring, and it doesn't pay very well. So you're like, well, I can earn more money teaching instead. A lot of the examiners are actually Russian teachers. So on one hand, well, I'm happy to give them a chance. It's fantastic. But my worry is that, like, when you prepare your students really well for CAE especially and CPE, my students probably know a lot more English than the examiners. So if they were to use some extremely natural expression, my fear is, do the examiners know that? Because to be a Cambridge oral examiner, you don't need to have ever taught a Cambridge exam. That's the thing. You just need maybe 2 years teaching experience. You go to do training for 2 days to watch a few videos to try and understand the assessment criteria and where to land a student between points 1 and 0.5, and that's it. And so that's my kind of fear. So when surprisingly, when a lot of my students, especially for CPE over the past 2 years, did their CPE exams and they got their marks back, I was like, appeal against the writing mark. There's something wrong, because with me, they would score very highly, but in the exam, they didn't get such a good mark. And I would say 90% of the students, approximately 90%, they were then awarded higher marks. And I was like, well, this worries me a lot. Right. Because that means, well, how, you know, if you're not going to appeal, then maybe people aren't getting the marks they truly deserve. So who's marking essays in Cambridge then?
Did they have to pay for appealing as well?
They did, but when the mark is increased, they get the mark back. That's the thing.
Oh, okay.
Get it back
I think there's the same with IELTS, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, it's the same with IELTS.
Yeah, this whole thing sort of worries me about the sort of quality of Cambridge. I feel there has been a noticeable decline.
Yeah,
there really has. Even in some of the material that they produce. Again, it's still the golden standard, but there needs to be alternatives. The reason why Cambridge is the golden standard is because their certificates are accepted anywhere in the world.
But they made it, right? They made it. I mean, they must have done some business, yeah?
They must have done.
I mean, yeah, of course. In other words, I know that they're like very authentic and very old universities in the world, but I think that we have given them a little too much power, as I said. You know, there are good universities in Australia, in probably in different parts of America and Canada. We can focus on those countries as well. Even in India, we have good institution, you know. Like,
well, exactly. The question is, why can't, say, India and Russia? Why can't we? Even though like English, but why can't we form our own variant?
Yeah, exactly.
And that like a worldwide accepted golden standard as well.
Exactly.
I don't know why Cambridge should be like, or Cambridge should have a monopoly on this. It's not right. And there is like the Pearson exam as well, but like it's just not popular.
But Pearson books are very popular, right, in Russia.
Pearson for me are the best. They're the best publishers. They're my favorite publishers. Really good books.
Right.
Much. It's ironic I'm teaching Cambridge exams. I'm slating Cambridge here, but Pearson books are better than Cambridge.
But one thing also I've noticed that. Especially in Pearson and Oxford books, all the UK made books, mostly, I mean, talking about the UK made books, are especially when it comes to the kids book, like some teenage books, up to the teenage book, I would say the topics are kind of angled towards UK. Like, you know, have you noticed that? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, always.
I don't like it. I really don't like it, man. I mean, you're sending these books to, they know they're sending these books to Russia, to different countries around the world. The topics should be very, of different varieties and different tests and different, topics. I find this is a little kind of, I don't want to say the word, but a bit, political.
There is. I know what you mean. For me as an Englishman, it's kind of quite simple. It's like, oh, I know that. But there's a couple of reasons for this. Firstly, EFL in England is very big.
That's true.
EFL in America is not very big. Yes, there are EFL schools in many American cities, but when you talk about a lot of EFL camps, it's bigger in England. That's a fact. Most of the publishers are in England. Pearson. They've got their offices in America, but Pearson,
Oxford, Cambridge,
Oxford. Macmillan. There are many of them. It's just a huge industry, and so a lot of the publishing happens there. That's the thing. But
it doesn't justify the fact that they are angled towards their own country. But
you can always. I agree. I think the publishers, like, the thing is, when they kind of write material, and I've looked at a lot of teenagers' books like this, and I agree with you. They look at, and I've always said that, like, I hate using these teenage course books with my teenagers in Russia. I can't do it. Exactly, I never use them. I use alternatives instead, because like these authors are like, for like kids who are like 14, 15, okay, speak up time, yeah, throw a ball, yeah, do you like graffiti? And my students are like, I've read War and Peace, and again, I'm like, yeah, sorry about that. And so the books are primarily written by British authors, well, in conjunction with other foreign authors quite often as well. But it is often done with the British mindset. That's the problem. It's done with the British mindset, the British political views, like social views. It's done with that. It's often done with very little research into other countries, which should be inclusive of India, of other European countries, with English learners as well. That's the thing. And that's why, for example, I cannot use a lot of textbooks. I'm not anti-textbook. I cannot find one which, first of all, isn't politically motivated,
Right.
because a lot of them really sort of try to preach certain political dogma.
Correct.
I find a lot of teenage books just really below the level they should be, just like
Mm.
intellectually condescending.
Mm.
You know, and so that's why when Russians here ask me, which book do you use for teenagers? My reply is, I don't. I use adult course books.
Best
And they go,
answer, yeah.
adult course books for teenagers? Like, well, yeah, because teenagers have an opinion. They're actually
Yeah.
pretty damn clever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, if you want to win over your teenagers, to have lessons without disruption, to actually get them on task, don't go down to their level, bring them up to yours.
Right.
Treat them like adults. Teenagers always believe they're like wise enough and worldly enough. Of course they're not, they're teenagers, but
Right.
treat them like they are,
Mm-hmm.
and they will be in the palm of your hand. And it's true, and it really works like that. So, because again, I just can't stand teenage course books.